He was escorted out of the dealership, humiliated in front of employees and customers alike, all because of a red MAGA hat he wore proudly. The manager loudly declared that people like him weren't welcome, completely unaware of who the man really was. The next morning, he returned, not as a customer, but as the owner of the entire company. What happened next was a lesson no one in that dealership would ever forget. The morning sun streamed through the polished glass windows of Liberty Motors, casting a golden sheen over the showroom's meticulously aligned cars. The hum of electric buffers and the distant murmur of sales chatter set the tone for what should have been just another day. Then Mike Henderson walked in. Mid-50s, broad-shouldered, with the calm demeanor of someone who had seen enough of life to know his worth. Mike didn't exactly scream troublemaker, but atop his head sat the unmistakable beacon of controversy, a bright red MAGA hat. It was clean, pristine even, and bold enough to grab the attention of nearly every employee within seconds. Conversations tapered off, and a few junior staff exchanged uneasy glances. At the reception desk, Ashley, a young, fresh-out-of-college hire, froze mid-typing as Mike approached. Her smile flickered on like a malfunctioning neon sign. Welcome to Liberty Motors. Can I, help you?" Her eyes darted nervously toward the hat, then to the ground, avoiding his gaze entirely. Mike, unfazed, leaned casually on the counter. "Yeah, I'm looking for something powerful. Classy. You know, something that makes a statement." Before Ashley could muster a response, the sharp click of dress shoes announced the arrival of Tom Reynolds, the dealership manager. Late 30s, perpetually annoyed, and a man who prided himself on maintaining what he called a progressive and inclusive showroom. In his mind, Mike's hat was anything but. Tom approached briskly, his posture stiff with barely concealed irritation. His voice cut through the awkward silence. "Good morning," he said, his tone dripping with fake courtesy. "Can I ask what brings you here today?" Ashley, sensing tension, stepped back slightly, as if caught in the gravitational pull of an impending conflict. Mike turned to Tom, his expression calm. "I'm here to buy a car. What else would I be doing in a dealership?" Tom's lips curled into a tight, insincere smile. "Of course. Well, just so you know, we cater to a specific clientele here. You might find something more suited to your style down the road. We have a few budget-friendly lots nearby." For a moment, Mike just stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slight raise of his brow and a subtle smirk, he replied, "Interesting. Thanks for the tip." Tom crossed his arms, clearly pleased with himself, while Ashley fidgeted nervously at the desk, avoiding eye contact with both men. As Mike moved deeper into the showroom, his sharp eyes took in every detail, not just the cars, but the people. He could feel the weight of their judgment, hear the whispered remarks just out of earshot. Yet, he made no move to retaliate. Not yet. Mike strolled through the shiny showroom, his hands casually brushing over the hoods of the luxury sedans. He took his time, inspecting the details. Sleek curves, custom trims, and cutting-edge tech. But the tension in the air was palpable. Tom, watching from the corner of the room, narrowed his eyes. "He's just here to cause trouble," he muttered to one of the senior sales associates, Steve. "Don't waste your time. If he asks for help, keep it short. Make him uncomfortable." Steve hesitated for a moment, glancing at Mike. "Are you sure? He seems serious about buying." Tom snorted. "Serious? Please, look at that hat. He probably just wants a photo up to post online. Treat him like the distraction he is." As Mike moved toward one of the high-end SUVs, Steve reluctantly approached. Mike greeted him with a friendly smile. "This one's a beauty," he said, pointing to the SUV's glossy finish. "What's the towing capacity on this model?" Steve, following Tom's orders, barely glanced at the car. "It's a lot," he said dismissively. "But honestly, I don't think this is in your price range." Mike tilted his head slightly, his smile never faltering. "Interesting assumption. Is that based on my hat or my wallet?" Steve froze, realizing he'd overstepped. But Tom, watching from a distance, gave him an encouraging nod. It's just, these models aren't exactly cheap. Steve stammered before quickly retreating. Outside, the passive-aggressive campaign escalated. Mike had parked his truck in a spot near the front entrance, and as he wandered back outside for a moment, he noticed two employees cleaning a car parked next to his. Buckets of soapy water and rags in hand, they were conveniently splashing dirty water all over the ground and onto Mike's polished boots. "Whoops," one of them said with a smirk, not even pretending to apologize. Mike looked down at his now soaked boots, then back at the employee. "Good job. You really nailed that cleaning thing." Without waiting for a response, he headed back inside, where a few employees were gathered near the front desk, openly whispering and glancing his way. Their hushed voices weren't quite low enough to escape Mike's ears. "Seriously? That hat? In public? Bet he thinks it's some kind of statement. So cringe. Probably wants to test drive something he can't afford." Mike didn't react, but he clocked every word, his patience thinning. At the front desk, Mike asked to see the pricing options for the SUV he'd been admiring. Before the receptionist could hand over the details, Tom swooped in, his smile as fake as ever. "Sorry, but I think you're in the wrong place," Tom said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe you should check out one of our sister dealerships down the road. They cater to, a more budget-conscious clientele." Mike leaned slightly on the counter, his calm demeanor unnerving. "Do you always treat customers like this? Or is it just the hat that's got you all worked up?" Tom straightened, sensing a chance to assert his authority. "Listen," he said, his voice rising. "We're a modern, inclusive dealership, and frankly, your hat doesn't fit with the progressive image we strive for here. So no, you're not welcome." A small crowd of employees and a few customers had started to gather, drawn by the rising tension. Mike glanced around at the audience, then back at Tom. "Well," Mike said, adjusting his hat with a faint smile. "Thanks for making your stance clear. I guess this dealership really does make statements, huh?" Tom, mistaking Mike's calm tone for defeat, smirked triumphantly as the room buzzed with murmured agreement. Mike turned and walked toward the exit, his measured steps echoing through the now quiet showroom. But even as he left, there was something in his stride that suggested this wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. Tom stood at the center of the showroom, his arms crossed and a smirk firmly planted on his face. Watching Mike continue his slow circuit of the dealership was grating on his nerves. The MAGA hat, perched proudly on Mike's head, felt like a personal affront to everything Tom believed his dealership represented. This wasn't just about one customer anymore. It was about making a statement. "Enough," Tom muttered under his breath, then turned to the burly security guard stationed by the entrance. "Get him out." Politely, of course. The guard hesitated for a moment, glancing at Mike, who didn't appear to be causing any trouble. "Are you sure?" "Do it," Tom snapped. "We have the right to refuse service to anyone, and he's anyone." The guard nodded reluctantly and approached Mike, who was leaning over a car hood, examining the details with genuine interest. "Sir," the guard said, his voice gruff but apologetic, "I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." Mike straightened up, raising an eyebrow. "Oh? And why is that?" The guard hesitated, but Tom, already making his way over, decided to handle it himself. "Because we don't tolerate disruptive behavior," Tom said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. He gestured broadly toward Mike's hat. "And we certainly don't welcome divisive symbols that make our customers uncomfortable." A hush fell over the room. A few customers stopped mid-conversation, their eyes darting between Tom and Mike. Even the employees, who had been whispering moments earlier, suddenly found themselves pretending to reorganize brochures. Mike, calm as ever, tilted his head slightly. "Disruptive? All I've done is ask about your cars. Is that what you consider disruptive these days?" Tom's smirk grew wider. "We're not interested in serving people who promote hate. It's that simple. Now you can leave on your own, or my friend here will escort you out." Mike held Tom's gaze for a moment longer, then smiled faintly and tipped his hat. "If that's how you treat potential customers, I'd hate to see how you handle real problems." He turned to leave, walking toward the glass doors with an air of unbothered dignity. Outside, the sun was bright, and the warm Texas breeze ruffled the brim of Mike's hat. As he stood for a moment, looking back at the dealership, a family approached. A father, mother, and a young boy clutching his dad's hand. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve, pointing toward Mike. "Why are they kicking him out, Dad?" Before the father could answer, Tom, who had followed Mike outside to savor the scene, stepped in. "Because," he said loudly, addressing the boy as much as the gathered crowd, "some people don't understand the importance of respect and tolerance." The father frowned, pulling his son closer, but the boy didn't look away from Mike, his innocent curiosity unwavering. Mike stood there, hands in his pockets, smiling faintly. Inside, though, a storm was brewing. He glanced at the dealership's logo gleaming on the side of the building. Liberty Motors, the name he had chosen himself not so long ago. It was ironic, really. Liberty indeed. With a deep breath, Mike nodded to the boy and tipped his hat once more before walking to his truck. Inside the dealership, the employees were buzzing with excitement. "Did you see how Tom handled that?" one whispered. "Yeah, that guy had it coming," another chimed in. Tom strode back into the showroom like a king returning to his throne. "That," he announced to no one in particular, "is how you deal with people like that." Laughter rippled through the room. "Good riddance," someone muttered. As Tom settled back into his office, he had no idea that his victory was about to crumble faster than he could imagine. The following morning, the showroom buzzed with its usual energy. Sales staff preparing for the day, engines rumbling faintly as cars were repositioned, and the receptionist fielding calls. But then, things took a sharp turn. The phone at the front desk rang incessantly. Ashley, the receptionist, juggled the incoming calls with increasing confusion. "Yes, this is Liberty Motors. No, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Wait, who did you say you were?" Her face turned pale. "You'll have to speak with the manager about that." She hung up and immediately dialed Tom's office. "Tom," she stammered, "I've got people calling from corporate. They're asking about some incident yesterday." Tom groaned, already irritated by what he assumed was unnecessary micromanagement. He strode into the showroom, coffee in hand, and barked, "What's all this fuss about?" Another call came in. This time, Ashley put it on speaker. A stern voice boomed through the small office space. "This is Bill, Regional Manager for Liberty Motors. Tom, care to explain why you kicked out one of our most important clients yesterday?" Tom froze, his coffee cup hovering midair. "Important client?" he repeated, feigning innocence. "Oh, you mean that guy in the MAGA hat? Please. He was just some troublemaker looking to start a scene. Definitely not important." There was a long pause on the other end. "That troublemaker is Mike Henderson, Tom, the owner of Liberty Motors. He bought the entire company 3 months ago." Tom's coffee slipped from his hand, the mug shattering on the tile floor. Half an hour later, the roar of a powerful engine silenced the faint buzz of the showroom. Every employee turned their heads as a sleek black Escalade pulled up outside, its glossy exterior reflecting the morning sun like a warning beacon. The back door opened, and out stepped Mike Henderson, flanked by a sharply dressed attorney and his assistant. His MAGA hat was perched proudly on his head, brighter and bolder than ever. His expression, however, was no longer calm and measured. It was laser-focused and serious. The attorney leaned in toward Mike as they approached the building. "This is the place?" Mike nodded. "Yep. Let's make sure they know it." Inside, the employees scrambled to appear busy. Some pretended to study brochures. Others suddenly became fascinated with polishing the nearest vehicle. Tom, standing by his office door, paled at the sight of Mike walking through the entrance. "Oh," Tom stammered, forcing a smile. "You're back." "Why?" Mike stopped in the middle of the showroom, surveying the space like a king inspecting his kingdom. Then, without a word, he stepped up to one of the customer kiosks, grabbed the microphone, and tapped it twice to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent. Mike cleared his throat, his voice calm but commanding. "Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Henderson." He let the name linger for a moment, watching as recognition flickered across the faces of several employees. "I'm the new owner of Liberty Motors, and it seems we have a bit of a problem here." Tom's face turned ghostly white. A few employees exchanged panicked glances, while others instinctively stepped away from Tom, as if physical proximity might somehow implicate them. Mike continued, his tone steady but sharp. "Yesterday, I came into this showroom, just like any other customer, and I was met with condescension, disrespect, and outright hostility, all because of a hat." He gestured to the MAGA cap on his head. This hat, a hat that for some reason made your manager think he could decide who deserves to be treated like a human being and who doesn't. Tom opened his mouth to speak, but Mike held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "Before you say anything, Tom," Mike said, turning his gaze directly on him, "let me make one thing clear. I don't tolerate discrimination, not from my employees and certainly not from my managers. This dealership is meant to be a place where every customer, is treated with respect." Tom fidgeted, his usually confident demeanor crumbling under the weight of Mike's words. "Mr. Henderson," Mike cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Save it. We'll discuss this as a team." He turned back to the room, addressing everyone. "Let's all gather. We need to have a serious conversation about hospitality." As the employees slowly shuffled into the center of the showroom, the reality of the situation set in. This wasn't just a lecture, it was a reckoning. The employees filed into the dealership's conference room, the air thick with tension. The room, typically used for routine training sessions and strategy meetings, now felt more like a courtroom. At the head of the table stood Mike, his MAGA hat still perched proudly on his head, radiating authority and calm resolve. Tom, visibly shaken, took a seat toward the back, trying to blend into the background. His usual bravado had evaporated, replaced with nervous fidgeting as his eyes darted around the room. Mike didn't waste time. He stepped forward, his voice steady and deliberate. "Let's get one thing clear right off the bat. This isn't just about me. This is about what kind of business we are, what kind of people we want to be." The employees sat silently, their gazes fixed on Mike. Some looked guilty, others intrigued, and a few even seemed quietly supportive. Mike's eyes locked onto Tom. "Let me ask you something, Tom. Yesterday, you decided to kick me out. Not because I caused a scene, not because I was rude, but because of a hat." He paused for effect, his voice sharpening. "Tell me, Tom, would you have done the same if I had been wearing a baseball cap with your favorite sports team? Or if I had a different skin color? Or maybe if I spoke with an accent?" Tom's face turned a deep shade of red. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he muttered something incoherent, looking down at the table in shame. Mike didn't wait for an answer. "You see, Tom, the problem isn't just that you disrespected me. It's that you disrespected every potential customer who might walk through these doors. And you didn't just do it privately. You made a public spectacle of it." Tom tried to muster a defense. "Mr. Henderson, I didn't know who you were. I thought—" Mike cut him off, his voice rising just enough to command the room's full attention. "You thought you could judge someone based on what they wore. That's not just bad business, Tom. It's bad character. And this dealership doesn't have room for either." He let the words hang in the air for a moment, then delivered the final blow. "You're fired." Gasps rippled through the room. A few employees exchanged wide-eyed glances, while others nodded in quiet approval. Mike continued, his tone softening slightly, but still firm. "Your bias didn't just offend me, it hurt our business. Customers talk, Tom, and thanks to your actions, they're talking about us in the worst way possible. I hope you find the place where your skills are better suited, maybe somewhere that values snap judgments as much as you do." Tom stood, his face a mix of humiliation and disbelief. He tried to meet Mike's gaze, but faltered under its weight. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and left the room, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. As the door closed behind Tom, the tension lifted slightly. Mike turned back to the remaining employees. "I want to make one thing very clear. This dealership belongs to all of us. It doesn't matter what someone believes, what they wear, or who they vote for. If they walk through those doors, they deserve respect, and that respect starts with us." The room erupted in applause. Even some of the employees who had been complicit in the whispers and side-eyes the day before joined in, their faces tinged with relief. Word of the incident spread quickly. A few customers who had been in the showroom during the confrontation posted their accounts on social media, along with photos of Mike standing confidently in his MAGA hat. The posts went viral within hours, with headlines like, "Liberty Motors owner stands up against bias, a lesson in leadership." MAGA hat and all, how one man turned discrimination into a teachable moment. The story became a rallying cry for fair treatment, sparking discussions about prejudice in customer service and beyond. Later that afternoon, Mike climbed into a brand new luxury SUV, the very one he'd been admiring before the fiasco. His assistant sitting in the passenger seat glanced over. "That was something?" she said with a small smile. Mike adjusted his hat and started the engine, the car purring to life. "Yeah," he said, a faint smile playing at his lips. "But sometimes it takes a little noise to get people to listen. Now they'll know. Respect isn't optional. It's just good business." As he drove away, the dealership's shiny logo reflected in his rearview mirror, a reminder of the day Liberty Motors learned the true meaning of its name.